What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. So today let's talk about a topic that has been coming up more and more recently, especially since Epiphone has started doing these higher end, inspired by, custom shop type guitars, right? And that topic is why a $1,500 Epiphone? Why? Who's this for? Why are they so expensive? And why wouldn't you just buy a Gibson at that point, right? Why wouldn't you just buy like a Studio or a Tribute or something, or, whatever, right? And those are valid points, sort of. So, I kind of want to break that down from my perspective as someone who is in the musical instrument business and kind of the day-to-day things that I deal with working for an instrument company as far as like product line goes and price points in the marketplace and all that kind of stuff goes. I have a unique perspective on it that I think a lot of people don't have. That's not to say your perspective isn't valid. It just might not be quite as informed, right? So I'm just trying to bring the daily experiences I have working in this industry and try to frame it in a way where you might better understand why Epiphone and Gibson are doing what they're doing. And not just Epiphone and Gibson, why other brands are doing what they're doing. LTD, Ibanez, whoever it might be, why they're coming out with these higher end import guitars instead of making their like flagship stuff more affordable, okay? So the first thing is to just go ahead and get out of the way that they still make the Epiphones that you've always wanted them to, like, that they've always made. They still make those. Like, you can still get an Epiphone Les Paul Custom for like $700, like a standard or a studio or whatever, an Epiphone, even cheaper than that. So like those guitars still exist. They haven't stopped making those. So I keep seeing a lot of videos and a lot of YouTubers saying things like Epiphone's gotten out of control, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. And it's almost like they're ignoring the fact that those other guitars still exist. They still make them. They're still in the product line. Like, no one has taken your $600 imports away from you. They haven't done that. Those guitars are still there. So, if that's like the only reason you're complaining about $1,500 imports, that's not a valid reason. Like, those guitars still exist. You can still go buy them. So, I'm not going to harp on that too much because I think it's kind of a dumb point, and I think it's kind of one of those things where, like, a lot of YouTubers are just trying to make, like, clickbaity, kind of like outrage content, talking about expensive imports, but they just want to ignore the fact that all that other stuff is still there. So that's, I'm not even going to go on any further about that. That's all there is to that. If you want $600 imports, they still exist. That's that. Okay, so into the real kind of meat of this. Why is Epiphone going this route? And I'm just using Epiphone as an example because that's what I have Gibsons. I have an Epiphone. I don't have any LTDs in here. I don't have any Ibanez's in here, right? So like if I did, well, actually, you know what? I do have another guitar that I'll bring up to kind of talk about as well. Here, let's do this. Hold on. Let me get a guitar stand. So I do have another guitar that also is a good guitar to bring up. This is a PRS SE Mark Holcomb 7-string, right? And this is a pretty high-end import guitar, right? And I don't see nearly as many people complaining about this. I don't see nearly as many people complaining about other brands. Not to say that this is a uniquely Gibson or Epiphone thing, but it kind of seems like people just want to harp on it for some reason. So this is a very high-end guitar as well, as far as imports go. And everyone loves these, right? So, I don't know. Anyway, back to kind of using Gibson and Epiphone as the example here. But my point with all that is the musical instrument industry in general, whether it be drums, guitars, violins, whatever, there's different price points in the product lines of those companies, right? Most companies don't just make one thing. They make a plethora of things at different price points because you have especially in guitars, you have a huge demographic of potential guitar buyers. You have beginner guitarists. Beginner guitarists don't need $1,000 guitar. They don't need a $1,500 guitar. They don't need a $2,500 guitar, right? That's not to say they shouldn't buy one if you're a beginner guitarist and you have the money and you want to buy a $2,000 guitar. By all means, treat yourself, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But in general, first-time guitar buyers aren't going out and dropping that kind of money on a guitar. So you need a guitar that is appealing to first-time guitar buyers. You got intermediate buyers. You have people that maybe have been playing guitar for a year or 2, 3. They want to upgrade from their cheap beginner guitar, but they don't want to go out and drop a whole bunch of money, but they want something that's a little better. You see where I'm getting at with this, right? But there's a big span of potential guitar buyers. Beginners, intermediates, advanced players, weekend warrior players, people that might gig a couple times a month. They want an instrument that they're comfortable taking out of the house, but maybe they don't want an instrument that's so expensive they're worried about it if something happens to it. Right. You have touring musicians, not rich and famous touring musicians, but just blue-collar touring musicians, right? You have professionals, people that make a lot of money, have a lot of money, and want to play the best stuff they can get a hold of. Session players, right? There's all these different kinds of people. So, say you are a company that makes guitars, and you make guitars in the U.S. like Gibson or Fender does, right? U.S. labor is more expensive. U.S. production is more expensive. So U.S. made guitars are just going to be more expensive. We haven't even got to the point to where we're going to consider the quality of the instrument or the build. We're just talking about labor, manufacturing, production cost, that kind of stuff, right? It's just going to make the guitars more expensive to do it in the U.S. or to do it in a European country. It's just going to cost more money. It just does. That's just how it is, right? So, it's going to cost less money to do it in an Asian country. It just is. Chinese guitars are cheaper to build. Korean guitars are cheaper to build. Indonesian, Vietnamese guitars are just cheaper to build. The labor is not as expensive. The materials aren't as expensive. The production cost isn't expensive. Those are just facts, okay? So if you just take a couple of people in the U.S. and a couple of people in Vietnam or China, and you have them each build a guitar, it's just going to cost more to do that, right? That's all there is to that. So if you are a company like Gibson, all right, we're just going to keep using Gibson as an example here, but this applies to any company, not just Gibson. This applies to anyone, okay? But we're just going to use Gibson and Epiphone as examples because that's what I got a bunch of in my studio, okay? You're Gibson. And you want to make a guitar that appeals to like that advanced / like weekend warrior type of like casual gigging musician / blue collar working musician, right? So these three groups of people are very similar in demographic and that they overlap a lot, right? That's what the statistics in the market show. These three groups of people overlap a lot. Advanced players, people that have been playing for like 5 years or more, with casual gigging musicians and with like full-time semi to professional like blue collar musicians. Okay, this might be the main chunk of people who are interested in buying a $1,000 to $2,000 guitar. Okay, because that's where you get. I'm not even going to say in my opinion anymore, because I'm in the industry and I see it. This price range is where you get the best quality guitar for the least amount of money, between $1,000 to $2,000, right? Past that point, you're paying for very small incremental, like, nuanced things. You're not necessarily like a $2,500 guitar isn't $1,000 better than a $1,500 guitar. Okay, it's just not. And I don't know why that like really gets on people. Like, people get real like just up and you just about that, right? It doesn't. Okay, a $250 guitar is nowhere near as good as a $500 guitar. A $500 guitar is actually twice as good in quality and build as a $250 guitar. I would even say a $1,000 guitar is twice as good in quality and, you know, build and specs as a $500 guitar. So those are very clear things to see, even to like non-experienced buyers or newer beginner guitarists. You can go to a store and you can pick up a $400 guitar and an $900 guitar, and you can like clearly see one of these guitars is twice as good. You understand why it's twice the price. You don't understand why a $4,000 guitar is twice the price of a $2,000 guitar, because they are not clearly twice as good. You know, that $4,000 guitar isn't clearly twice as good, because it isn't. You're paying for very small incremental things like certain types of inlay or binding or pickups or relicking or aging, or it's built in a custom shop, or, you know, you start to pay for these other things that don't directly correlate to the playability, sound, or quality of the guitar, right? They're ornamental things. And so that's where people kind of start to get, I don't understand why this guitar is twice the price of this one, right? So that's why I say the best quality to money ratio is in that like $1,000 to $2,000 range, right? So if I'm in this demographic of people and I'm looking for a guitar and I want the best value for my money, okay, I could go buy, right? Gibson doesn't make these anymore, but there used to be this guitar, the Gibson Les Paul Tribute, right? I think it retailed for like $1,300 or $1,400 around that price, right? So he said, why would I buy a $1,500 Epiphone when I could buy a $1,500 Gibson, right? There's a bunch of reasons. And so this all kind of led up to this. This is why you would go with a $1,500 Epiphone over a $1,500 Gibson. So in order for a company like Gibson, who's based in the U.S. and paying for U.S. labor and U.S. production costs and everything, to get a guitar at that price point, they have to make a lot of sacrifices. Cheaper hardware, cheaper pickups. You know, the Tributes, they didn't have any binding on them. They didn't have full-blown, like, gloss nitrocellulose finishes. They had, like, really basic satin finishes on them. Right, the construction was a little different. You know, cheaper tuning machines, etc., right? They're cutting away incrementally all around the guitar to get it to that price point, right? So there's that. A $1,500 import guitar, right, might have name brand locking tuning keys on it, stainless steel frets, mother of pearl inlays, name brand pickups, Seymour Duncan's, Gibson custom bucker, right? Like full glossed finish, you know, the whatever, the whole 9 yards, if you will, right? So And import guitar manufacturing has gotten so good these days that you can't make the argument that like Asian import instruments are just inferior quality. They're not. They're not. If you think that they're inferior quality just because they're made in another country, you're wrong. Sorry, you're wrong. They're not. Okay? Just because they're cheaper doesn't mean they're not as good. Sorry, you're just wrong. So, if you are one of these people in this big kind of like middle demographic of potential guitar buyers, especially if you're in the weekend warrior, like semi-gigging musician or professional blue-collar gigging musician, right? Those two demographics, say I want to buy one of these guitars. Do I want to buy the stripped down version of the guitar that might be a little less reliable, that might not have as good components into it, that I might have to change some things out on, or might not really feel like the thing I'm wanting it to feel like, right? Because, to be honest, like the tributes and stuff, they do not feel like a Gibson Les Paul Standard or a custom. They don't. They feel different. Right? Well, do I want to buy something like that just because it's made in the U.S., just because it actually says Gibson on it? Do I want to buy something like that? Or do I want to buy something like this that feels a lot closer to this because it's got the gloss finish and stuff. It's got name brand pickups in it. It's got upgraded hardware. It's, it's got all of the bells and whistles and stuff of the higher end type stuff, but at an imported price point, right? So there's less of a, like, I might have to do something like this, right? Like I can buy this guitar, I can take it out of the case and go play a gig with it. There's none of this like, I might have to change this or change that or do, whatever, right? So which would you rather have? Now, there's an appeal to both of them, okay? If you just want a Gibson, and clearly I don't have a problem with that because, look behind me. I don't have a problem with you just wanting something that says Gibson on it. I understand that. I get it, and that's why they made it that guitar. But if you don't care about that and you're more interested in just, I want the specs, I want the quality, roadworthy instrument that I can take out to bars and clubs and venues and play and gig with, and I don't care about what the headstock says, then that other guitar is probably not the guitar for you. Something like this is probably more in line with what you want. That's why these kind of guitars exist. I know lots of guys in touring bands that play import guitars. They play LTDs, they play Ibanez's, they play Epiphones, right? They play SEs, they play PRS SEs, right? I know a lot of people in touring bands that play import instruments because they're awesome. The quality is great. A lot of them come with Seymour Duncans or Fishmans or EMGs or DiMarzios or whatever. A lot of them have stainless steel frets and locking tuners and stuff, right? Like, there are LTDs now that cost $2,000, right? Because they're so spec'd out, it's insane. Because you can't buy an ESP for $2,000, an actual ESP. You can't buy a brand new ESP for that much. It costs $4,000 or $5,000. Because the production cost because they're all made in the US and the production cost is way more. So if you're just someone in a gigging band, but you want a guitar that's spec'd out and has all of the upgrades and the aftermarket stuff right out of the box, high-end imports are the way to go, because you can just walk into a Guitar Center and grab one of these and it's got a Duncan and a custom bucker in it, or you can walk right in and grab an Ibanez Iron Label or a LTD, with Fishmans in it or something and stainless steel frets. So it's like, if that's all you're interested in is the reliability and the consistency and the durability of a guitar that you can take out on the road with you, high-end imports make the most sense, right? So when you see Epiphone moving into this market, the reason they're moving into this market is because companies like Ibanez and ESP have had a corner on the high-end import market for the better part of a decade, right? No one's been competing with them. And Schechter's another company, right, that makes really nice high-end imports with stainless steel frets and all kinds of stuff, right? No one is, like, Epiphone hasn't been anywhere near that in competitiveness, right? Epiphone has always been thought of as this, like, beginner intermediate brand for cheaper to mid-level guitars. And they're trying to move into the high-end import guitar. And from Gibson's perspective, it's more profitable. They're going to make more money off of high-end imports than they are low-end domestically built guitars. They're just going to, okay? So that's why they discontinued the Tribute models, because they can't make any money off of them. Everyone wants to know why they discontinued the Les Paul Tribute. Because they can't make any money off of it. Because for what it costs them to get the materials and pay the people to build it, they can't sell it at that price point anymore. So they're not making any money. So even though those might have been like the best-selling models they had, in order to make any money off of them, they would have had to raise them to a price point that exceeded their practicality. At that point, you would just save up a little more and buy like a Studio or a Classic or something, right? So they weren't making any money off of them. They make money off of this. The margins are a lot more forgiving on high-end imports than they are low-end domestically built guitars. Sorry about that. My phone died for a second, but we're all good now. Anyway, yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Those guitars weren't profitable. High-end imports are way more profitable. So that's why companies like Gibson and ESP are moving in to this more higher-end import market. It benefits the players more. It's more profitable for the companies. And I could make a whole other video about Gibson in general and why they're doing the thing that they're doing, and I probably will, but that'll be this video's already gone on long enough, so I'll make a separate video about why Gibson's making $50,000 guitars, right? Well, that'll be a whole other video, but long and short of it, that's the whole deal, is high-end import guitars are just more profitable than low-end domestic built guitars. The profits of margin are higher, companies make more money on them, they can be higher spec'd with better parts at a lower price. So that's the long short of it. Again, I know people are going to get in the comments of this video and like argue about it. And okay, but this isn't really stuff that's like an opinion. Like I said, I'm in the industry. I see it every day. I see our own, the company I work for, I see our own issues with price point guitars and having to raise prices due to like, inflation and stuff like that, and production cost and materials cost, right? It's a struggle every day to keep the guitars at the price points you want them to be at. Because at the end of the day, companies we want to sell guitars. That's what we want to do. We're not trying to outprice our own guitars. We're finding ways every day to make them stay at the price points they're at, even while the stuff around us is going up in price. So it's a struggle for every company out there, right, to keep their products at the price points they want them to be at. Right? If Gibson could sell Les Paul Customs for $1,000 and make the same kind of money off of them, they do it all day long. They can't, right? So that's why companies are moving more resources into the high-end import market, because they can just make better guitars that are higher spec for less money. So you might not like that, and that's fine. You don't have to like it. That's just what's happening. That's just the facts of it. So I hope you guys learn something from that. Maybe you enjoy that kind of stuff. Maybe you don't. You know, it's kind of nerdy, the business side of it. This guitar is phenomenal. This PRS SE is a phenomenal guitar. Both of these guitars are great, and when I'm playing them, I don't feel like there's anything lacking from them, right? I don't feel like they're inferior quality instruments. I don't. So, take that for what you will. Hope you guys liked the video. You know, leave me a comment. Tell me how you feel about all this. If you like this kind of stuff, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If this is your first video, thanks for making it this far in. This isn't the only kind of content I do. I do gear demos and all kinds of stuff like that too. But I see this coming up a lot, especially around the Epiphone thing, as their prices increase and they come out with increasingly more expensive guitars. I just see a lot of people screaming about it online. So, from someone that's in the business, this is why this is happening. Yeah. Thank you guys for tuning in the video. I'll be back soon.